disorders. I chose it just because I found the Jamil's presentation interesting, as well as the executive function seminar, the one over
brain rules.
Yeah, brain rules. So. Sorry. Okay. So basically, there are many different learning disorders. They're characterized by poor academic performance and low test scores. That's basically the characteristics of it. They are congenial in nature, which means they can start off in the womb. So it can be through trautogens, which are like alcohol, things that filter through to the baby's womb. Maybe it's through substance abuse or too many medications being taken. They're familial and heritable, so they can be influenced by the environment as well as the biological factors. And then they can also be caused by neurological damage. So that could be either while the baby's in the womb or through early childhood when, like, you're riding on your bike and you kind of fall off and hit your head because you're not wearing a helmet, or you fall out of a tree or something like that. So the two ones, okay, well, the prevalence and incidence of learning disorders, I believe the students that are currently affected is 5 to about 17%. It's more prevalent among males than females. And when it's compared to Hispanics, African Americans, and Europeans typically have more learning disorders. And a majority of the learning disorders are comorbid with ADHD and attention deficit disorders. The other ones are comorbid with mental and psychological disorders, like just crazy. But it's important to know the difference between learning disorders and learning styles. Some people may struggle in class because they may be hands-on learners, and then so the class could just be like me talking to you the entire time, and it's not really getting to that person. And it could also be visual learners where, they're looking at a movie or a presentation and they learn more, but the class may not be tailored to that individual. There's also auditory learners where some people record stuff and maybe listen to themselves talk or listen to tapes and kind of get the information better that way. But the learning disorders are different than the learning styles. So I took the two learning disorders that I chose were dyscalculia and dyslexia. I was gonna choose executive function as well, but I thought that would be kind of redundant, seeing that we went to the seminar already. So dyscalculia is basically a learning disorder or several disorders that could make a person struggle in math. It seemed they have struggle with visual spatial difficulties, language processing difficulties, working memory, neural basis of underdevelopment, cognitive representation, and a lack of skills. So those could be the many different problems that cause the learning disorder of dyscalculia. The visual spatial difficulties are the way a person basically perceives the problem. Sometimes everybody's seen the little meme on Facebook where it's like 2 + 2 is 4, now calculate the mass of Venus or something like that. Sometimes it appears like that to a person, like it just doesn't make sense when they look at it. The language processing difficulties is like arithmetic, when they're reading the problem, it's just like a word-based problem. That's what they struggle with. And the working memory is like adding things up in your head, like 2 + 2 is 4, everybody knows that, but like more complex problems, some people have struggles with that. And the neural basis of underdevelopment, there's a section of the brain that's underdeveloped that causes a struggle in math, and it's the frontal parietal lobe or something, somewhere in that region. and it causes them to kind of struggle with math and arithmetic in that area. The cognitive representation is basically how they perceive it. It kind of ties into the visual spatial difficulties and the lack of skills. An article that I was reading said a lack of intelligence, but I kind of didn't understand that, and I didn't see how that's possible. But a lack of skills, maybe it was just they weren't taught. Like, as a kid, I was growing up and I went to many different schools. In Arizona, I went to some of the best schools, and then I went to some of the worst schools. And my ability to do math kind of got messed up because one person taught it to me this way. It was a really good teacher, and then I had like an Indonesian teacher who I couldn't really understand, and she was just really confusing me because she taught me all these complex formulas, and so I just kind of gave up on math. So dyscalculia is prevalent amongst primary school children. That's 5%. So I believe we're secondary school kids, right? This is a secondary institution. So we see it in like K through high school. It's 5% prevalent, and 20 to 60% of those are comorbid with ADHD, and the other ones are actual mental disorders. So the best way to treat it, just like I don't think it can be medicated. The best way to treat it is if it's caught on early, and it's complex because it's not you have dyslexia, you have something that's causing you, or dyscalculia, it's something that's causing you to be struggling in math, so sometimes they can't pinpoint what it is. So these therapeutic sessions have to be individually tailored to each individual. It can't be like some cookie cutter session that everybody gets. And basically all it is just repeated practice of a concept, and they're cut up into specific sections. They take their time. They're in small interactive groups, so it's like small sessions. And the important aspects of the therapeutic treatment would be basic numerical skills and the development of arithmetic reasoning. So, now, dyslexia is like reading and like language. There's several types. There's P-type, there's L-type, and there's M-type. P-type dyslexia is, I believe it's perception, and it's like basically the way the person sees it. Like, I'm going to use the markers in a second, and then L-type is linguistic. So the way the person, I guess, sees the language, and then M-type is a combination of both. So for a person with P-type, they would read it really slow. They would read really slow and like laborious, and then a person with L-type would read extremely fast, and they wouldn't really comprehend a lot of what they just read. And the M-type is just a combination of both, like I said. So dyslexia is basically a neurological disorder resulting in abnormal processing and interpretation of information. And just like dyscalculia, it affects people on different levels. One person may kind of just struggle with it there and here, and another person it may be really severe in another individual. So the treatment of this was, one treatment that I found interesting was the balance model. It was created by Baker. And what it is there's two aspects of it. The HSS, which is hemispheric spatial stimulation, and then the HAS is the hemispheric eluding stimulation. And the HSS, it involves presentations of words to a computer simulated program into the left or right visual field activating a specific region. And the HAS is words letter by letter in different fonts in order to activate the visual perceptual aspects of the right hemisphere. So for the HAS, I don't know if you guys can see this, but it'd be like a lowercase p, then a big B, then an A, CH. Like, so that they would kind of have to really pay attention to that. Yeah, and then another problem that comes with dyslexia is when we're doing like elementary level reading, it's mainly the the right hemisphere, and it's because it's not that complex. But once we get into more complex reading, we switch over to the right hemisphere, and that's where a lot of the problem comes in. So some people just don't make that switch, and when that switch doesn't happen, then you see dyslexia. And I have a video of an expert giving a little bit more information on dyslexia, and he may be able to put it into perspective a little better than I can. Just one second. And dyslexia and dyscalculia you can't really overcome them. They're lifelong disorders, but you can develop skills to help manage them.
Thank you for joining us today for the next of our Ask the Expert video series. Today, I would like to present a very general overview of specific learning disabilities, what they are, and how to think about them in the context of other kinds of disorders. You'll see that I put specific learning disabilities inside an umbrella, and my reason for doing that is because the term specific learning disabilities, the phrase, is in fact an umbrella term within which there are many different types of specific disorders. So let's unpack what we mean by specific learning disabilities in general, and then talk a little bit about each of them. Learning disabilities by definition are disorders in basic psychological processes that involve understanding and using language. And by that we mean the ability to receive, process, recall, and then communicate that information. And we do that not in a vacuum, but we do that in particular kinds of areas. Within the specific learning disability definition, and under that umbrella, we're talking about certain disorders that impact reading. So for example, a learning disability in reading is often referred to as dyslexia. And dyslexia isn't just reading words, it's also the ability to understand what you're reading, it's also the speed and the accuracy with which you read. So reading, dyslexia, specific learning disability in reading. In the writing domain, a specific learning disability in writing is often referred to as dysgraphia. Dysgraphia could be any number of different kinds of things. It could mean different things to different people at different stages of their learning disability experience or during their lifetime. But it's not just how they hold a pencil or how they write, but it's also how they organize themselves and plan and edit their writing. So it could be anything that falls within that writing domain, that expressive language, expressive written language domain. Spelling is also an area very much impacted by learning disabilities in reading and in writing, and they're very much connected in some very important ways. And math, also a learning disabilities category, is often called dyscalculia. And dyscalculia, or learning disabilities in math, involves not just one thing. Again, it's not just counting, but it could involve the fluidity and flexibility of how it is that a person operates within the counting and numbers domain. It could be measurement, it could be estimating distances, and it could be counting and making money, it could be understanding patterns and rules, working with numbers. So it could be any number of things, but learning disabilities, a specific learning disability in math, is referred to as dyscalculia. Learning disabilities are also impacted by the ways that we process information, the way we listen, the way we view things, the way we organize new information as it comes in to us through our senses, through our ears, through our eyes, through our touch, through any number of sensory processes. So in the auditory processing domain, there are children who have very strong preferences, for example, to have information presented them verbally, the way I'm speaking, but would have a terrible time if they were in a classroom and the teacher was just writing on the board and not talking out loud. So they would have challenges in the auditory or visual processing area, depending upon how that information was presented. They would also have difficulty retrieving information that they heard, remembering and then processing and then getting that information back and then doing something with it. if they were being taught in a way that wasn't consistent with the way that they preferred to process information. Sensory motor information is important to consider in the learning disabilities domain, and under that LD umbrella, what we mean by that is fine motor control, manual dexterity is involved as well, eye-hand coordination. Children with dyspraxia often have those kinds of difficulties in sensory motor integration. And then there's the whole area of social and emotional functioning. Students with specific learning disabilities are not necessarily those kinds of kids who have difficulties in the social domain, but because so many of them often miscue language, they often will say something and mean something else, or they won't be able to find the right word for a situation, they could easily be ridiculed or not understood by their peers. Often there are some nonverbal cues that they don't pick up on, so they don't necessarily know when something is appropriate to say or to do, and those are the kinds of things that with maturity and practice can be taught to individuals with specific learning disabilities. Self-confidence is something that's very important. If you go to school every day and you are fearful that you're going to be called out to read, and reading is the one thing that you don't do really well, you're not going to really look forward to sitting in that class where the teacher may very well call on you, and your sense of self, your sense of empowerment, your sense of confidence may very well be diminished, as is the case with many children with learning disabilities. And some students with learning disabilities have difficulty with transitions, moving from one comfortable situation where they learn the rules, where they have those teacher-student relationships, where they practice certain things and they know how to accomplish and achieve success, moving to a new situation. Often those kinds of transitions are difficult for students with learning disabilities. I need to also say that learning disabilities are not the result of poor vision or poor hearing. They're also not the same as children who have difficulties on the autistic spectrum. They're not the same as intellectual disabilities, the term we use formally known as mental retardation. They're not consistent with, or the same as, or interchangeable with emotional or mental health kinds of issues, emotional disturbance. And very importantly, learning disabilities are not the result of disadvantage. So for example, cultural, environmental, or economic disadvantage are not the causes of learning disabilities. If you'd like to comment on this video, or if you have more information to share with us about specific learning disabilities, or about anything on our website.
Okay. And here is my website.